Hello everybody and welcome back to LRN, as today we review the Japanese Grand Prix. And what a weird day it was. We had, of course, all the headlines, all of the drama, all of the controversy, and only a 28 lap race. So huge amount going on, huge amount to get into, but we're going to kick it off with Max Verstappen, and what a drive he had today. Massive congratulations to Max Verstappen, a deserving champion this season. He has been phenomenal all season long, and today especially in the wet conditions, not a single foot wrong. Absolutely smashed it from the beginning, when of course we had the initial 2 laps prior to the red flag, and then post that when we got going again under the safety car eventually. He just flew off into the distance, away from Charles Leclerc, away from Sergio Perez, and just absolutely imperious form from Max Verstappen, and a worthy world champion. So congratulations to Max Verstappen. Obviously, it was kind of, no one really knew what was going on. The way it had been talked about all race, it was a conversation about how the points would work and whether or not he would even be able to get enough, because we didn't have enough laps. And the way that Crofty and the Sky F1 guys were explaining it was that we wouldn't get enough points because it was all about race distance. So let's explain how it was perceived to have been working, and then we'll go through actually what happened and why he ended up getting full points for the race, and how that led to him winning his second world championship. If you are new around here though, please do make sure to subscribe on the bottom right hand side. It really helps the channel out and on our journey to 500 subscribers. So I really appreciate if you could subscribe to the channel, hit a like on the video, and let me know in the comments below what you thought of the Japanese GP, everything you thought, all of the controversy. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below and get involved in the chat. But we'll kick it off then, just going through how the point system actually ended up working and why it ended up working, where Max Verstappen got full points for the Japanese GP when it was being absolutely shoved down our throat that would not be the case, and it would be reduced points. So for races that ran beyond 25%, but not 50%, the winner would get 13 points. And for races that ran for 50% but not 75%, it would be 19 points. Anything more than a 75% was full points. That's how it was being explained to us at the time. But with the Japanese GP running to 28 laps, just over 52%, many had been under the impression that Verstappen would get 19 points for his win, as discussed just a second ago, with Perez getting 14 for second and Leclerc 12 for third. But what actually turned out to be the case is that there's a second rule that basically circumvented all of that discussion and meant that full points were always going to be provided, and that is Article 6.5 of the FIA regulations, which state if a race is suspended in accordance with Article 57 and cannot be resumed, points for each title will be awarded in accordance with the following criteria, which is what we just went through in terms of race distances and percentages. The Japanese GP did not fall under this, however, because it ran to the checkered flag as it had hit the 3-hour maximum event limit. The rules regarding the reduced points allocation, Article 6.5, only apply in the event of race suspension that cannot be resumed, and therefore full points are awarded, and Max Verstappen is world champion. So basically what's happened is, all of that rules around percentage distance is if a red flag is brought out on a race and the race cannot be restarted. And because the Japanese GP was restarted behind the safety car, we got going again. It completely negated all of the rules and regs around race distance and the sliding point scale for the point system. So that was completely negated, and we went back to full points because we got going again after the red flag. I'm not personally sure that makes sense. I think you should still award points based against race distance. I think that should be looked into and perhaps changed, so that even if you do get going again, you still reward points based on lap distance. And that's not in any way because I want to change the result of what happened today. Max is a worthy champion, and I'm happy that he got the points enough for him to get his second world championship today. It was absolutely inevitable that he was going to win that championship. And the decision that's made today is in line with the rules. So absolutely nothing has been done wrong from that point of view. But I am of the point of view that the rules should be looked at and potentially changed for the future. Because as far as I'm concerned, a 28 lap race should not have full point allocation when you've only done just over 50% of the race distance. That to me doesn't make sense. It is a long way from the fast that we had at Spa in the previous year. But at least I think that sliding scale rule with the laps to points is actually a really good idea, and I think it should be implemented all the time, not just in a really specific scenario where there's a red flag and you don't get going again, regardless of how many laps were done previously. So that's my opinion. Again, let me know in the comments below if you agree, but certainly for this point of view, the rules have been applied as they should have been. So in this particular circumstance, everything's been done as it should. Max is a worthy champion, and congratulations to him for an absolutely phenomenal drive. But what we're going to do now then is go back to the beginning and look at the race chronologically. Start at the beginning, the first couple of laps, of course, leading up to the red flag. Skip through that delay, and then go into the actual race proper, our 28 lap race, and see what happened there. So we'll move on to the race start and delay. So of course, if we look back right to the start of the race, really exciting start to the race. Obviously in the UK, I was up at 5:45 to watch the race. So early start. Really excited for the race to get going. Was so happy to see it get going, even though it was wet conditions. I think that was really good. I'm glad we got to see the race start. We didn't have a Singapore scenario where the race was massively delayed, despite the fact it probably could have got going. Obviously, we didn't even see the wet tyres in Singapore. It was an absolute mess in some ways. So to see that they at least tried to get the Japanese GP going was great. Of course, visibility did become an immediate concern, but we'll get into that in a second. So race got going. Obviously, for the guys at the front, the visibility issue wasn't quite as bad for the ones in the midfield. Leclerc had a brilliant start. I think it was 0.28 second reaction time to Verstappen 0.31. So Leclerc just getting the better of Verstappen on the reactions. And then Verstappen, though, holding his line around the outside of turn 1 and turn 2, allowing him to take more speed around the outside and defend his position. So great start from Leclerc, but fantastic defending from Verstappen to retain his position. And of course, as we already discussed, the rest is history. Verstappen went on to easily see out the win at in Suzuka. We also had, and I have to have a special mention here for Lance Stroll. I've never been Lance's biggest fan. I've made that clear on the channel before. But what he did today from that race start, where he's gone along the pit wall, found that dry line that no one else found, and he's jumped himself from 18th to 11th place with just absolute minimal margins either side between the pit wall and the tyres of the cars to his left-hand side that you couldn't even see because of the amount of spray coming off of them in front. Absolutely phenomenal driving from Lance Stroll. A massive props to him. Huge bravery. Great just nous for him to go over to the side, find that bit of dry line that no one else used to get up to speed quicker and just get round the outside of those cars. I thought was absolutely brilliant. So massive props to Stroll there. I think individual moment of the race in terms of the brilliance of the overtakes for Stroll and just the bravery, just putting it through that little gap between the wall and all of the cars, of course, making their way down to turn 1. I thought that was absolutely phenomenal. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments below, but I have to say, Stroll in the last couple of races has impressed me, at least in moments. So long may that continue. I hope he can up his game, because we all know he's not going anywhere for as long as his dad remains in the sport. So if he can up his game and start to show more of that and be more consistent and score more consistent points, which he needs to do, and he will really need to show, of course, in his partnership with Alonso next season, I hope he can do that, but we'll certainly see. But for today, that moment I thought was fantastic. So let me know what you thought of it in the comments below, but I thought that was brilliant. We also saw Ricciardo at the very beginning jump up to 8th from 11th, so decent start from him. Tsunoda jumping up the grid from 13th to 9th. And we also had, of course, a collision between Vettel and Alonso, where sort of we had Vettel turning too much into turn 1. He had no visibility. He was hoping there was no one there. You could see it on the camera. Alonso was still there, though. Alonso did absolutely nothing wrong. Vettel's crashed into him, but again, nothing he could do. He was basically trying to guess where the corner was. So he's turned in. Alonso's still there, and that sent Vettel off the track and rejoined in last position at the time. Thankfully for Vettel, though, no damage to his car at that stage, and that definitely helped him out, and we will come back to talk about Vettel in a bit later. Of course, then we move on a bit further down lap 1, and we know what happened next. Sainz crashing into the wall, aquaplaning in the right-hander, into the barrier, sending the Rolex advertising hoarding across the track into Pierre Gasly, who's then carried that all the way back to the pit, had to come into the pits, and of course the pack of cars has gotten away from Pierre Gasly there, which has caused what happens next. And just a special mention though for Alex Albon, who of course ended up having to retire at that particular point as well. Just after Sainz had gone into the wall, we saw Albon peel off to the side and retire due to an engine failure. So not involved in anything, thankfully for Albon, but not the race he would have wanted given that he had to retire at that time. So mention to Albon there. But over to the Gasly and to what happened next with, of course, the on-track rescue vehicle that has kicked off a whole load of fuss and a whole load of controversy today. As I say, short race in terms of total laps, but big talking points and big controversy, and this is a major one. So we'll get into it. Gasly's gone into the pits, and while he's obviously gone into the pits, around the same time, the safety car's been brought out. The rest of the pack is gone because he's in there trying to get a new front wing because of the hoarding that's hit his car has done damage to his front wing. So he's come in, he's then followed it round on his own, trying to catch up to the pack, as we see cars do at every race. There's a safety car. They do not drive, and this is a separate conversation, right? But whether or not or how much a car should be slowing down under single waved yellows, double waved yellows, is a separate conversation to what happened with the on-track recovery vehicle. And what's happened then, he's gone around the track, and as he's come around, still under yellow conditions, double waved yellows, as he's coming past Carlos Sainz's car, he comes around the corner to find that there is an on-track vehicle there, literally on the track on the left hand side. If Gasly had lost control of his car, he could have very easily gone into the side of that vehicle. Now, I think the way that Sky handled this and the pundits on Sky handled this was incredibly wrong. I don't know how you felt watching it, if you were listening to them talk about the particular situation, but what we basically had was them trying to put the blame for this on Gasly and talking about how quickly he should have been going under yellow flags. Now, let's be clear, the conversation about when a recovery vehicle should be allowed to enter a track is separate to the conversation of how quickly should drivers go under yellow flagged or double yellow flag conditions. They are two separate conversations. One is something that needs to be investigated immediately, and of course, if they want to be clear, build in new regulations they think will increase safety when it comes to how quickly drivers can go, same as they do with the pit limiters, or have areas where they'll have a delta like a virtual safety car that they need to meet through yellow sections. Because I do admit we have it, you know, in qualifying, where they'll just do a downshift, they'll just come off the accelerator, just for literally a blip to show that they've acknowledged the yellow flag exists, but essentially they ignore them. You know, we do not see cars significantly slow down under yellow flag conditions. The FIA know that they won't slow down significantly under yellow flag conditions because they never do. So to allow that vehicle to come onto the track when they know where Gasly is, they have the telemetry, they have the data, they know where Gasly is going to be and when. I do not understand the argument that it is Gasly's fault that that vehicle was there. The vehicle itself was completely unlit. You could barely see the lights on the back of the vehicle. He didn't have a red flag. They were talking about the red flag as well and how under red flag conditions, he should have been going slower. The red flag came a second before he arrived on the scene where the vehicle was. You saw it on his actual steering wheel where the red flag came up. You saw it just go off to his left-hand side, where on the board where it shows the flag, it turned from yellow to red, and it was literally a second before he arrived on the scene. So again, how is he supposed to respond to that? He's doing what people always do under safety cars. When you're at the back, you get your foot down and you catch the safety car cue. Once he'd caught the safety car cue, if the red flag hadn't been shown, then I would suspect that what should happen is the vehicle should be allowed out, because all the cars are slowed down behind the safety car. You have then peace of mind. There's no cars going around on their own quicker, and then race control can say, proceed, go and recover the vehicle. That's, in my opinion, what should be happening. What they did, though, was they just sent the vehicle out, even though Gasly was still going round on his own, not behind the safety car. He hadn't caught the safety car cue yet, and on his own, he could have so easily gone in to the side or underneath the recovery vehicle they put on track, and it is absolutely unacceptable. We've seen the drivers come out and make the same points. So yes, I think there is a conversation to be had about drivers and how quickly they go under yellow flags, etc. But that conversation should not have impacted this, because the recovery vehicle should not have been there until all of the cars on the grid had caught up to the safety car queue. That, of course, isn't in FIA legislation at the moment, but it should be. It is something that's been brought up many times over the years, especially after the Jules Bianchi issues. And we definitely never, ever want to see anything like that happen again in Formula One. So to allow these situations to still happen, and for common sense to fail to prevail, it's such a common sense situation. Just wait until all of the cars are neutralized and in a safe situation behind the safety car before releasing a recovery vehicle, a large one, onto the track where you are putting drivers at risk. To me, that is simple. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments below, please. Do you agree in terms of just using practical common sense? The FIA have announced, so they will be putting a full investigation into what happened, and based on the driver feedback that's been given. So I'll give you some quotes here from the FIA in response to all of the claims from the drivers and, of course, the media and the public in response to what's happened. So what the FIA have said as a statement at this time is, while it is normal practice to recover cars under safety car and red flag conditions due to the particular circumstances, and also taking into account feedback from a number of drivers, the FIA has launched a thorough review of the events involving the deployment of recovery vehicles during the Japanese Grand Prix. This is part of the common practice of debrief and analysis of all race incidents to ensure continual improvements of processes and procedures. One of the key aspects of the investigation will likely be whether the trackside marshals acted unilaterally in sending the crane out so quickly, or they were authorized to do so by race control. Article 2.61 of Appendix H of the International Sporting Code, by which all FIA events are run, states clearly, no marshal or vehicle shall enter the circuit perimeter without permission from race control. So there is a question there which needs answering. Did the marshals act without the permission of race control? If they've done that, that is a big no. That's another investigation that will be needed specifically into that. How was that allowed to happen? Why weren't they trained? Why weren't they told what to do? I think that does come back then to the FIA. Why are they having marshals or who haven't been trained correctly and how to follow out their duties around the track? That is not necessarily the marshals' fault. Of course, they want to do the right thing. They want to recover the vehicle because for safety reasons, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, they do not enter the limits of the track unless given permission to do so by race control. That's something they should all know. And if they don't know it, that is not the marshal's fault. That is a training issue and needs investigating further to avoid any issues like that at any other Grand Prix on the calendar at any stage in any season. That cannot be allowed. But the situation is, at the moment, the investigation will take place and we'll find out more duly whether that's, I'm not sure how long that investigation is going to be or what the ramifications of it will be. Of course, today we're grateful that nothing serious happened. But of course, it could have, and we want to avoid any situations in the future where it could happen because it's just not necessary. If we lose a lap of racing because they have to go around with the safety car one more time because they had to wait for all of the cars to catch the safety car before releasing the recovery vehicle, fine. I don't think anyone's going to complain about that because it makes complete sense. If I'm wrong, let me know. But to me, that makes complete sense, and it would be such an easy thing to do. They could have just waited for Gasly to go past, then they could have started the procedure. But that again comes back to, was that the marshals doing something they shouldn't have done, or did race control allow it to take place when they absolutely shouldn't have? So let's find out more when the result of that investigation comes out, and we can release further comments as to what happens there. At the moment, it's too early to come to those conclusions, but certainly lessons need to be learned, processes need to be changed, and new rules need to be put in place when it comes to recovery vehicles entering the track when drivers are still on the going around the circuit, especially if they're not behind the safety car. So we'll see what happens with that. And of course, then we move on to the main event that we actually had, the second race, the 28-lap race that started behind the safety car, which was the right thing to do. The visibility was not right to start off straight away from a standing start. And also you need to consider on the grid, if you will have a drier line at this point of the race. So to have people line up on the wet side of the grid versus the drier side, it would have been very unfair on all of those who started on the much wetter side of the track. So it would have been an unfair way to start the race at that stage. So definitely starting behind the safety car was the right thing to do, allowed them to clear obviously a lot of water from the track as they were going round, and then we finally got going. And then it all blew up, right? It's fantastic. I thought the 28 laps were really exciting. Of course, we've been waiting years to be back at Japan. I was really excited for this race. In dry conditions, the Red Bulls and the Ferraris looked so close on pace, but we lost Carlos Sainz, of course, as we've already spoken about. But Verstappen in a world of his own, he's gone. No question about it. He's been fantastic, right? So he moves on. But there's so much stuff going on behind them that we can get into. So first of all, the visibility was still bad. The spray from the tyres was still bad. No fixing that. Open wheel car racing, that's just what happens, right? But what we did see is as soon as the safety car came in, we saw Vettel and Latifi pit immediately for the intermediate tyres. So when they started behind the safety car, the rules say they have to start behind the wets. And I have to say, I was personally thinking, why in the hell do we even use the wets anymore? What's the point? No one uses them. We sit around waiting for races to get going, and when they do get going, they're on the intermediates again, even though we've been waiting due to rain, so the wets never seem to get used. But in this particular scenario, I think we finally saw why. Because strategically, it made this race brilliant. And Vettel and Latifi, on that first lap, pitting straight away on the intermediates made a huge difference. Because Vettel, of course, we know how well he did in this race, ending up finishing in 6th place. A huge result for Vettel. I'm so happy for him, especially when you consider right at the beginning of the first bit of the race, when we had our first couple of laps before the red flag, he'd spun out, he was at the back of the grid. He's taken an opportunity. He's come in for the intermediate tyres as soon as possible with Latifi. They've come out together, basically side by side. Thankfully, no penalties there because it wasn't an unsafe release. And then they've used the clear air and the faster tyres. It took, I think, a lap or two for them to warm up. But once they did, the intermediate was so much quicker. And then once everyone else has come into the pit to actually put on their intermediate tyres, Vettel and Latifi have been so much quicker than everyone else that they've gone from being at the very back of the grid to being in, 7th and 8th, Vettel and Latifi respectively. I mean, that is absolutely massive. The performance advantage of that intermediate tyre over the wets was absolutely huge. So massive performance there from Vettel and Latifi, which I thought was absolutely brilliant to see. And it made such a more exciting race to see it mixed up like that. And the strategy between the wet and the inter was really interesting. We also saw Mick Schumacher stay on the wet. They were basically saying, stay on the wet or hope for a safety car. You can come in and you'll be right at the front. The safety car never came for Mick, so he eventually, of course, had to pit for the Inters, and that dropped him all the way back. But for those that came in straight away for the Inters, specifically Vettel and Latifi, it paid off massively and made them jump ahead, leading Vettel finishing 6th in this race, which was absolutely brilliant. massive, massive, just happy for Vettel. Massive props to him for a fantastic strategy, just making it work, not putting a foot wrong in the second part of the race and coming home where he did. Go to Alpine. Alpine had a fantastic race, obviously looking to fight back after the issues in Singapore. They obviously finished with no points. McLaren making the most of that, having a decent weekend despite not being particularly quick. But Alpine, they came back with a vengeance this weekend. McLaren not finishing well, I think finishing with 1 point in 10th and 11th. Alpine, Ocon especially, had a fantastic race. Alonso had a good race, pitting for a fresh pair of inters near the end that were actually 4 seconds a lap quicker. That allowed him to come into the pits with only 8 minutes to go in the race, make up all the time that he'd lost to the cars in front, and then repass George Russell, and then nearly pass Sebastian Vettel as well for 6th position. But he managed to come home in 7th place, which was a massive result for Alonso, but Ocon managing to hold off Hamilton as well and come home in 4th ahead of Hamilton in 5th. It also had Russell in 8th, so good race for Hamilton, good race, a struggle of a race for Russell. Not living up to, of course, he's still, of course, point scoring, but it's not at the level he's been for the previous few races or this season. I think a tough weekend for Mercedes, when actually at this track I thought they'd be pretty good, but they didn't seem to have the pace in the wet conditions. Would it have been different in the dry? I'm not too sure, but certainly didn't have massive pace. You could see they were quicker than the Alpines. Like Hamilton was clearly, if he'd gotten past Ocon, would have been the quicker of the two. But it's also fair to say that the straight line speed of those Alpines is awesome, and the wet conditions, they were behaving brilliantly, and it's a well-deserved result for Alpine. I think the writing's on the wall for McLaren. I don't think they're going to be able to recover the pace disadvantage they have to Alpine. So unless they get lucky with Alpines having DNFs, crashes, incidents, I can't see that McLaren are going to beat Alpine now. I do look forward to the next few races. I hope that McLaren can keep that fight going and we can have a battle between those two teams right to the end of the season, because I think it's one of the most interesting fights left in this particular season. Probably the most interesting battle this season still to play out, because we think the drivers and the constructors is done. 2nd place in the constructors is probably done. 3rd place in the constructors is probably done. So it really is a battle in the Constructors' Championship, at least, for 4th and 5th between Alpine and McLaren. So I hope I'm wrong and that McLaren can find some performance in the last few races. But from what I've seen, it just looks like we're going to see Alpine take over and probably finish comfortably points-wise ahead of McLaren, unless they can pull something out the bag. So fingers crossed that can happen. But I'm going to put, at the moment, probably going to see Alpine finish ahead of McLaren at the end of the season, maybe even with a couple of races to go where it's nothing to play for. Because I think based on today's result as well, huge points haul for them, back ahead of McLaren. I just don't see McLaren winning back, but we'll see. Keep an eye on it. Certainly could be excitement ahead in that particular battle, and I look forward to seeing what happens. But that was the race in a nutshell. Of course, we saw Verstappen go and win his championship. We saw the Leclerc, we can't forget about this, the Leclerc penalty at the end of the race on the very last couple of corners. He's obviously got it wrong into the braking zone, gone off, and then blocked Perez, and that's given him the 5-second penalty that's handed the championship to Verstappen. But as we know, it was inevitable. Verstappen was going to win, whether it happened today, whether it happened in Austin. He was winning that championship. So it really made no difference. I don't think Charles Leclerc was going to be there angry that he's given up a chance at the World Championship. I think he know full well that chance went a long time ago. Their thoughts and their plans are going to move to the next season, and we're going to see, I hope, next season, a bigger, longer, better, broader challenge for the World Championship. And if Max can go and win his 3rd championship, then fair play to him. Can he go and beat Vettel's record of 4 world titles in a row for Red Bull? Let me know in the comments below. Do you think he's going to achieve that? Do you think Mercedes are going to come back? Do you think Ferrari are going to step up? Do you think another team, maybe like a McLaren or an Alpine, can upgrade enough to become part of the conversation? Let me know in the comments below. But will Verstappen beat or equal Vettel's 4 world championships for Red Bull? 4 seasons in a row. Let me know if you think he'll do that. But for now, he's a 2 times world champion. Of course, we're pending the result of the FIA investigation into the budget cap, and we will find out the results of that hopefully tomorrow. And if so, we'll be up live again to talk about that. So again, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to be notified when we come on, because I'll be doing a full review of the FIA findings, what it means, our reaction to it. Depending on what it is, of course, the reaction could be completely different. We may find that, and at least what's being said at the moment is they expect there to be very little in terms of ramifications, because they expect the spending to be only, it will be over for Red Bull, but not as much as originally thought. And because it'll be a smaller amount, they expect that, you know, any such penalties to probably be a fine, as opposed to any massive points deductions. And if they were points deductions, because it was a smaller amount, it would likely only impact the constructors and therefore would not impact Max. So that's the latest that's coming out of it. Is that true? Who knows? Maybe it was true that they've gone way over. Maybe it's true they haven't gone over at all. We will find out when the investigation is fully closed and we get to read the report, at which stage we can discuss why it was delayed, what the issue is. Do we believe the actual report? Are the rules of the FIA in terms of the cost cap and are the budget caps stringent enough? Should the penalties be harsher? Should the amount they're allowed to go over be less? Things like that. We'll get into all that detail when that report comes out. So make sure you subscribe to the channel to be notified when we do. Otherwise, though, I just hope you enjoyed the Japanese Grand Prix. I thought it wasn't what we thought it was going to be. It wasn't what we hoped, because, of course, I wanted double what we saw. We only got 52% of a race. I wanted 100. Don't mind that it was in wet conditions. I thought that added a lot to it. I loved the wet to intermediate strategy calls. I thought that added a lot to the race. But certainly glad to be back in Japan. The fans were amazing. I feel so sorry for them sat out in the rain for a couple of hours, but they kept their spirits up. They were dancing, they were clapping, they were waving. Really, really good to see. Fantastic fans out in Japan. One day, hopefully, I'll get to go out to that race. And I hope that you do too. But as I say, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit like, make sure to subscribe, and make sure to let me know all your thoughts on the Japanese GP in the comments below. Otherwise, I'm going to thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a great day. Goodbye.